Hi everyone, welcome back to the Ignite podcast. My name is Renee Huang. I'm the founder of Wild Women Tribe and your host of Ignite podcast in partnership with Park City TV, who's our media sponsor. The podcast has evolved into this time of sitting down with two women in the community who are doing inspirational things and talking about topics that really matter. So I'm really excited today to dive into the idea of your happiness toolkit. The things that you can do in your everyday and day-to-day to curate the feeling that you want to bring into your life. I'm excited to welcome Jill Johnson from the Paint Mixer and also Tess Arneson. Is that?
Tessa Arneson.
Arneson from Maven Strong. These are two women who have been doing amazing work in the community. Tessa, basically you curate community connection and help women find their purpose. And Jill is an art therapist.
Yep.
Yep. And you own the locations of the Paint Mixer, which
yes.
are amazing experiences for women and men and kids to come together through art.
Yep.
Yeah. So welcome. I'm excited to talk about happiness and what we can do to really bring that feeling more into our day to day. It's interesting, bringing two women together who don't know each other has been this magical experience, because once you really strip away the things that are the chit chat that we tend to go to and dive into something that really matters, I find the most beautiful conversations can come to light. Happiness. Let's talk about, what do you even perceive in that word? What is the role of happiness, or how you perceive that in your life?
It's about feeling a little bit in control of your emotions, and I'm not saying in control of your life, because I don't necessarily believe in that, but just having a purpose that feels conscious and owning it, even when the sadness might come up, but also being able to, for the most part, creating a happy feeling overall in your life. That's how I define it.
I love that. Yeah, it was interesting, because for me growing up, my parents were both immigrants from China, and they had a lot of struggle and sacrifice to come over to North America, and I honestly, happiness was not really something that they talked about, or it wasn't even, you get good grades, you're a nice person, you kind of go to a good college, you marry a great person as well, but happiness, it was not really
secondary.
Something. Totally. Yeah. So this is a new concept for me as a grown-up. What about you, Jill?
It's interesting, because it's really evolved for me.
Yeah.
I think happiness, I've kind of run on happy. It's kind of my general disposition. Even my resting face is a smile, which is good and bad. I mean, it's a good thing, and then it also is deceiving, because people will just perceive that it's always just so. But I feel like it really was a conscious effort when I was younger, because I felt like I was going through that awkward, there's the awkward redhead stage. I don't know if you guys know about this, but it happens to a lot of redheads. And I just realized, if I could just smile and just be someone that was fun and fun-loving, I could kind of temper those times where I felt off.
So happiness was your default?
Yep, it was my default.
But also your mask?
Yes, it was also my mask. And so now I'm finding, for me, happiness is really presence. And just being able to hold space and being in the moment, where I feel like I start to spin out of that word, and I feel like that word has a lot of connotations to it.
Yeah.
But when I spin out of equilibrium, which would mean unhappiness, is when I'm too far forward or too far in the past. So I find that when I'm present, I just feel a sense of calm that could be equated to happiness, to a bunch of different emotions. But I do feel more, just balanced if I can stay right here, versus if I'm trying to race the next thing. I know when I'm in trouble when I'm starting to play Tetris, I call it my mind, and I'm trying to put things together and make it all make sense. And like you said, with it, I can't really control it, but I can try to be aware of what's happening within me.
Yeah.
And that's really like an ounce of control in the situation.
Yeah.
So that gives me a little more sense of calm.
So Jill talked about how she was when she was younger. Were you always kind of aware of your emotions and like deliberate?
I've always been a big feeler, for sure, whether it was really sad or really happy. And so my struggles surrounding depression and anxiety really helped me. I came to these lessons much earlier than some people, because I always felt it. I had a lot of sadness early on in my late teens, early 20s, that I had to develop some other tools that would really help me deal with it, because I didn't know what else to do. So it was either figure out how to get happy or really change the trajectory. So that for me, I'm a generally happy person. I'm lucky as well, but I also have this underside that I think a lot of people don't talk about. If you have some depression, have some anxiety, you actually can be both.
Yeah.
You don't have to be either or. I'm a depressed person. I can also be a happy person with some underside of depression, anxiety. So that really caused me to really push into how can I move the needle on my happiness meter, I guess, when I am running a little low, and how can I move it to the opposite. So.
Well, and I think feeling, being able to feel, like you said, but I think there's this idea that we have to push it all away to be happy. And I think for me personally, and what I've witnessed with others going through a lot of different things, is having to feel it. When we're masking it, when we're pushing it away, it's like pointing the needle straight at it. No matter where we turn our compass, it's going to that direct north, because we're either avoiding it or we're putting too much energy on it, or something is drawing us towards it. So I do feel like there's a need to acknowledge when things are off, a need to feel when things are off, and then come through it in a different understanding. I like to see it like as an ascending spiral. I feel like I go through the same lessons over and over, but each time I'm like, oh, that's a little more. I'm like, I thought I got that one. I really thought I got it that time. Do I have to learn it again? And then I go through it, and then I'm like, oh, I have a little more perspective. It's just broadened my horizon. I have much more compassion than I did before.
Well, it's like traveling, right? When you go back to a place that's familiar, you're like, oh, I know this place. Right? And if we can think of our emotions as like those places that we visit, and we're like slowly learning to become at ease with them, and like take away the shame and judgment or whatever. Like you're saying, the word happiness even is kind of sticky. Yeah. Right? Because it like implies
that there's nothing else.
Yes.
Right. Or that you should be happy or whatever. Like I love diving into that, because it's like, well, it's just a feeling.
Yeah.
Right. And then I love what you said, Tessa, about like your emotions are just there. They're not your identity.
They're not.
Right? It's like something you're feeling, and then you'll feel something else tomorrow, and like you might feel happy now, but you might feel sad tomorrow, and you might feel angry or frustrated, and it's okay. That's not who you are.
And just being like you said, just going back to that awareness piece of just noticing and giving that emotion space. So whether it's shame, whether it's fear, whether it's anxiety, whatever it is just is being able to have a conversation with that small part of you, and letting it. I had a great mentor that said, "Why don't you ask it for tea?" And I was like, "I don't want to ask shame for tea. No thanks. I'm going to keep that 18-year-old girl in the corner, and I don't want to actually talk to her. But as soon as I actually joined her for tea, which I think it just makes it a little lighter." And asked her what she actually needed. All she really needed to be was heard. So now that she's allowed to come into the house more often, it's not as scary, right? So you take away some of that fear, kind of what you said, where you like every time you relearn that lesson, it's a little softer. So you're still relearning the lesson, but it doesn't feel as big. So even when I have to look at that, like that shame that comes up or whatever it is, it's like, okay, I know you, and if I acknowledge her or acknowledge that feeling, it's just a little less, it's less sticky. Doesn't take it away, unfortunately, or fortunately, and it just allows it to be, which I think is so hard, but also so it's less fear. It takes away the fear when you look at it.
But it's like learning anything new, right? You're teaching yourself a skill, like, oh, that makes me uncomfortable. You know, it's human nature to kind of
Then I don't want to do
say,
that.
I don't want to do that, you know. And one of the things with Wild Women Tribe is like we kind of take people into discomfort, but say like it's safe, you know.
Yeah.
It's uncomfortable because it's like something that you can process through and come out the other side like in an even better place. So discomfort is almost like a cue for, hey, there's work to be done, right? And it might be scary, but good. Like you're safe. You create like the structure for feeling okay in that discomfort, and then you kind of like navigate through and like make a little bit of progress, and then revisit that place. You know, come back to that journey and make a little more.
I think that big piece of like having the container for things to be able to be vulnerable and to be open. You know, when you were talking about that, taking them to tea, a lot of times when I work with my clients that have been through different forms of trauma, whether it be sexual trauma, PTSD, we're creating artwork, but we're not processing or defining what it is. We're talking to it. So at the end, we're usually doing a witness writing where we have a conversation with the art, and it gets us into that subconscious space of understanding. So it's more intuitive. So we're not trying to just like,
you don't have to define it.
Yeah, like, oh, well, see, I'm not so good at this, but we get into this space of, oh, this is what it's trying to tell. This is what's trying to bubble up, versus me trying to make meaning out of it.
Yeah, or add a judgment to it, right?
Yeah.
Like watching it as a movie, you know, and you being just a bystander and not having to reach out and add a judgment to it, or add an additional feeling to it, or that is bad, so I can't, you know, cannot. It's just, oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Nice scene,
Yeah.
right?
Well,
and it'll pass.
Yeah, and the playfulness of it, when we get into a space of playing into it, it loosens it. So the impact of it is not so heavy, it's not so intense, it's not so fixed.
Yeah.
And you don't feel like you're in cement anymore. There's a little bit more of flow and movement, whereas before it's a fixated point. Yeah, definitely.
Because you don't know what to do with it.
Yep.
Right, so then you're just kind of in panic mode almost, and like, I have to address it, I have to
change it,
fix it, right? We get in our heads, right? And that's just like a place that we go to, because I think as humans, like, we just want to think our way through it.
Yes, well, right? And it's that fight or flight.
And
you know.
Yeah. Well, and you said something interesting, Jill, about like a safe space. Can you guys talk a little bit about like how you do that for yourself, or maybe even with like your loved ones and your friends and family?
Yeah, I mean, for me, like, I feel like it's presence. Like the minute you're fully, like when I am fully there, I can tell it feels safe. When I'm able to sit like with a client or a group and just witness without the judgment, with just like open compassion, it's safe. If I'm trying to put my ideas on it, I can feel the minute that it shifts out of safe. All of a sudden it has weight to it. So for me, it's just really being present and making sure that when people walk in, they can feel that, you know, and it's hard to give it a lot of like how-tos.
Yeah.
But I just know, I mean, when I can feel it when I know somebody's there in the moment or already somewhere else, or
if the cell phone's around and they're like rustling around and not making eye contact, or
all of that, you know, I think it's it. What about you?
For me, in our studio, we talk a lot about creating with staff and also with clients that come in, is making sure that the space is a safe space and a brave space. So safe comes first before necessarily someone can be brave, sort of that uncomfortability that you're talking about. So really, we just keep talking about it. It's plastered on our walls. We continually start a class and say, hey, car wash, you came through that door. This hour is all about you. Be selfish, be here, be connected to your breath, be in your heart, be in your bodies. I want you to feel the things, and you know, if you fall down, which we ask people to do, I want you to push your limits, because if you know them in a safe space, it's a way easier to do it in a space outside that might not be that container that we can control, right? In my studio, I know it's very safe. I know instructors are going to say the right things. I know they're going to treat people the way they need to be treated in times of you know, people walk in with big, heavy suitcases
Yes.
with them, right? And we don't know what they're walking in with. So I'm very certain that space is really safe. And if you can be brave there, it makes a hell of a lot easier to be brave outside of a safe space that's not necessarily guaranteed safe, right? We don't know when we walk outside who's going to be coming at us, what we're going to have to deal with. And we can do all we can to sort of, okay, I'm going to decline that call until I find out what's going on there, or I'm not going to answer that email until I get a little more centered, whatever it is. But we can't always be ready for that, right? And we don't necessarily want to be. So the idea being, be brave when you are in a safe space, so you can also be brave when you're not necessarily in a safe space.
Yeah, it's beautifully said, because when I'm in the studio, that's exactly what it is. It's being able to create. So they're coming up and there's a moment of vulnerability of just like, what do I do? And you want that, especially if you've been through a traumatic experience. There's this mistrust of you of your own self,
like,
and not hearing your voice.
Yeah.
And being a little scared. And so to have those little moments in spaces that are safe, so that when you are in the world, you can tap back into it. It's almost like having like a touchstone that you can reach back to.
I love the touch tone.
You know?
Yeah.
And it's like, well, we were talking, Jill, earlier about kind of like the science behind things like emotions, right?
Yes.
And how we really, like brain synapses, I'm not a scientist, but like the things that you think are kind of hardwired into you. And so your brain will just flow to those things more naturally, but you can really create new neural pathways by creating habits of thought, which then allow those thoughts to flow more easily, right? I mean, it's really just biology and chemistry, right?
Yeah, and I think noticing, for me, I was just, we were talking earlier and I said there was a moment yesterday where something happened and I felt this contraction, and I can feel it physically. I feel my heart just, it feels like someone just goes, and everything just tightens. And I was like, oh man, I was just triggered. And okay, so now what? I could go into full calling a couple people and be like, OMG, da 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 da, you know, or I can slow it down for a minute and just be like, okay, why is this triggering me? And what can I do with this? Do I need to take everyone down? Do I need to go home and take my family down? I could have easily gone home, and instead I was like, I like made a salt bath and poured a thing of whiskey and like sat down. I was like, okay, just breathe. It's gonna be another day tomorrow. But I mean, before, I think I would have gone down a habitual thing. Yeah.
But so how do you get there? Because I love that. I love that
Noticing.
you were so aware.
Noticing.
But how did you notice?
So
how did you even like get to the point where?
It was slowly but surely, like, I felt, I really spiraled when I bought the business, because there were a lot of things that I did not know about, that
Most
suddenly
things.
were there. So all of a sudden, what I thought I got was not what we got. And then finding out all these things, and it put me in a place of like total fear.
Self-doubt.
I've never been so afraid. And then living in fear brings all that adrenaline, and I got really sick. I had like the anxiety, all that stuff that comes with it, to such a point that I had to either find some ways, I had to use the tools that I've always worked with myself, but really in a new way, or maybe not be here. You know, like it was getting extreme. I was getting very sick. So it was places of just noticing. And the first thing I could do is notice when I got sick. Why was I that sick? Sometimes it was because, I caught something. A lot of times it was because something else was going on and I was not dealing with it. And then just noticing, for me, I can feel it in my chest. I can feel my stomach tighten. So noticing that, just the physical sensations, and then starting to notice what they're attached to, what the triggers are, and then taking myself out of situations. Like, do I need to go into that situation? Do I need to walk into that when I know it triggers me? Like, why am I walking into it over and over and over again? And slowly just unpacking that. And just bunt hits, Like, it's not a grand slam. I think there's part of me that wants to just like figure it out tomorrow. And I was like, or right now, and really realizing that it's just little steps. It doesn't happen overnight.
But you're like making those little pathways.
Little
by
pathways,
little, and
yeah.
It's like the awareness, which comes more easy.
Yep.
Each time.
I imagine like these little fairies with like brooms, just like dusting away. Like, come on, get it out.
connecting the
Yes,
circuits.
yes, totally. Just little small
They're
things.
working slow.
Working
Yeah.
slow, but they're
Yeah.
getting there. Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
What about you? Was there
Well-
like moments or how you
Yes,
noticed?
so many moments, but something to add on to why it's so easy for us to get stuck in some of those negative thoughts is because we no longer, as humans, have to survive.
Yeah.
We are out of that mode. We don't live in a wartime. We don't live having to forage for food, all sorts of things that we used to have to do.
Yeah.
So now when something negative comes up, it's almost like hardwired in our brains to attach to that. And it's interesting when you realize how many positive things you have and how easy it is to just negate all of those and hang out with this negative Nancy over here. And when I realized that, oh, it's hardwired into me, that sort of helped me just stutter step a little bit or question, putting a question mark or not believing every negative self-thought. Because I used to believe, this is silly, but of course I did because everybody does. I used to believe every thought to be truth.
Yeah.
And in reality, they're all neutral until you assign them to believe, to have a belief behind them. So they all were true, right? So negative, positive, neutral, everything was true. And when I started putting question marks behind the negative ones of why you don't know what the hell you're doing, trying to build this business, trying to build this block, trying to manage this many people, what are you doing? So as soon as I started putting question marks, or asking a question back to it and saying, why not me?
Yeah.
And it's not foolproof. Like you said, it's like sometimes a bunt hit.
Totally.
It's good enough.
Sometimes
But
a strikeout.
the question mark and not believing them to be true, and then really nailing down into routine for me and stripping away all excess. I'm actually was just speaking to a friend on my way up, and I'm a little over toasted right now. And it sort of happens slowly, right? Where you don't realize it, and then all of a sudden you realize it. And you're like, oh, okay, what do I do in those moments? And for me, I peel back commitments, I peel back work a little bit, and I'm really routine on sleep, on I eat pretty clean, I strip back alcohol, because for me it's causes some depression, and I really put my fitness pretty high up, and then I throw some other mud. I meditate, I journal, which journaling for me I don't necessarily do every day, but if I'm overcooked like I'm starting to feel right now, that is a place that I lean into. And then I up my therapy because you have to build your support team, and the first thing that I want to do is just isolate, because I'm like, no one's gonna want to hang out with me when I'm this, when I'm sad or when I'm feeling this way. So I don't want to bring anyone else down, or I don't want to let my staff down, or I don't want to let my business partner down, or I don't want to let my husband down. So I just isolate, and I kind of just am quiet, and then that's not really helping me get out of it either. So those things of noticing, like you said, in your belly, in your breath, and then building your support team around it, or the toolbox is how we refer to it, is my go-to. And it not all the things work all the time. You have to throw a ton of mud to make that happen. Like fitness, running might not work. So then, then what else do you do that day? And you might not fix it that day. Again, bunt hit. Like some days you strike out. Like, and it is what it is. But it's about progression, not perfection. Tiny little bits.
Yeah, and there isn't one way.
And gentle. Yeah.
Like I always say, I hit it with like 10 different things. I don't know which one worked.
Yeah, you totally
But I just know that I came towards it with a lot of stuff, and I think the support and knowing who, I love how you say your tribe, but like knowing who can see you. It's hard. I know that certain people expect happy Jilly, And then I know those that can really hold when that's not so true. And being okay with that. Being okay that everyone's a little different and not everyone has to serve you the same way.
Right, being gentle with yourself and everyone,
yeah,
right?
And I can't say that enough. Like,
And
with
knowing
happiness, like, be gentle. Just be gentle. Like, just be so kind to yourself. Like, we're all just stumbling in this crazy, crazy world, and just know that everyone is, and just be okay with when you fall and when things aren't okay, because it just comes around, you know.
Well, and I
Makes
love,
me teary.
but I love the way the conversation is about emotions in general and how, you know, we all feel them and we don't have to assess so much value onto them or like strive for that untouchable feeling that we're not in right now. It's just, it's okay. You know, like be where you are.
Yes, and it's not a duality. We get so caught in either
we do.
or.
Either or. It's
And it is like a myriad. Like I am like, right now that made me like emotional. So I felt the tears, but yet I'm joyful, but yet I still have a little bit of stress. Like it's all this mix. It's not one thing. Yes.
Right. We're not two-dimensional.
No,
we're
not at
so
all.
multi-dimensional.
Yeah. Which we know, but I think there is that habit from the fight and flight, you know, hardwire in us to pick one.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's impossible not to, right?
Yeah.
And then it's you being able to just stop. It's a little like stutter step, a little stop of just, notice.
Yeah.
Like, it's
This
just
could
that
maybe be
awareness.
different.
It's the people are always coming into our space looking for change, and they always say, I don't know how to change, and it's always from noticing and awareness. And as soon as you do that, it just feels a little less scary.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and even with my kids, like I'll talk about, do you like how you're feeling right now? You know, are you feeling anger? Are you feeling frustration? If you don't like that, then like give yourself the power to think a different thought. You know, and I think like a lot of times we get swept along in these feelings and just feel like we have to feel the feeling.
Yeah.
But if we realize like, oh, my brain is this beautiful thing that I can train to really think the thoughts and lead me to the feelings that I want to have, then how amazing and cool is that, right? So I find myself in that exercise as a mom, like just kind of saying, well, if you don't like it, then think something else.
And those are this is what's so cool about our generation and the one coming up is like we're being curious around that. Like these were conversations that I never had.
Yes.
With my mom,
Right.
you know, like there were like little tiny like top layer, like, are you feeling sad? You know, like, but there was no, how do we go about changing that? How do we go about recognizing that? You know, that so your kids, my kids, kids, people you're affecting in your therapy, like they're getting tools that we didn't even touch until, I mean, I certainly didn't consider this until, you know, mid-20s to late 20s to early 30s where I was finally like, enough is enough. What can I do differently?
Yeah.
Imagine growing up with it, you know, as I'm talking to my 2-year-old and she's angry at me and I'm talking through something with her in such a different way than our parents did for us. It's going to be a game changer for them. What are they going to do with that?
Yeah, you know, it's interesting because with skiing, you know, at a young age, I was seeing that I was getting kind of tied up in the gate because I was really good when people succeeded, when others succeeded, but when I succeeded, I was much better loser, and because I just wanted support, and it was that same thing of questioning, like, well, why me? Why am I doing well? You know, and so learning visualization was a really big thing when I was younger, and that really opened up a whole pathway. And I think so many times it's athletics that get younger kids open to the power of thought. But then now it's like, well, how do we get that stillness? Because everyone's in such a fast mode. Everyone's trying, I mean, just even like the posting, the likes, the dislikes, all of it, we're in a comment culture now. So finding stillness and how to cultivate that so that when those thoughts come in that big, swift, flowing motion, how do we find a sense of calm in it so that we can see them and not be them?
So what would your like number one tool in your happiness toolkit, in your emotional toolkit be right now?
Honestly, I throw all the mud, so I couldn't name one. It's all of those things that I listed, because sometimes one day one works and sometimes another works. Sometimes if I start a run and I don't have it in me, I stop and I sit my butt down and watch the grass blow in the wind, and for me that is a huge tool. But the adaptability, but also the routine. So it's like being a little, again, gentleness, flexibility, but having a routine or a toolbox that you're like, oh, that didn't work, let's grab another. So that's probably, it's not a one answer, because for me it started with sweating and like you said, sports for like a big thing for a lot of kids, and so for me that was my only tool. And then when it was taken away from me with a big injury, that's when I was like, okay, let's find some others, because this is not conducive to rely on one tool.
What about you, Jill? Do you have like
You know,
a
I feel
go-to,
like
or?
it kind of goes with that is just staying curious. Like just curiosity. I remember asking my grandma, who was like my everything, who my daughter is named after. But I always said, she just seemed timeless all the time. And I always said, well, what's your secret? She's like, I just stay curious. And I think it is a curiosity about, sometimes it is, sometimes it's nature, just getting outside. We're so lucky, you know, after living in cities, like we are so lucky to have it at our doorstep. It's just right there. So the minute you open the door in Park City, you're kind of like, okay, well, this is pretty darn good, you know. And then I do the same thing. I have meditation, I have movement, I have mantras, I have journaling, I am with my kids just laughing, I'm with my husband, I'm with my sisterhood, you know, I'm with community, and having times where I'm just totally isolated, loving my little inner hermit that just really wants to just be all by myself, you know. So I do think it's being curious and also doing the work. You know, you can have all the tools and they can look really pretty in the toolbox. You know, I can have all my paints and have it look all nice, and it's like when you get those crayons and you're afraid to touch them because they're so perfectly, like just
So get messy.
Get messy.
Yeah.
Just don't be afraid of it. Just try it on and then throw it to the side if it doesn't work.
And what works for someone, one
Doesn't
of your friends,
work for
doesn't work
everybody.
for
Yes,
everyone. So
and
just
that's
like
okay.
being okay and being brave enough to
Yeah.
like find what that series of resources is for you.
I named my daughter after my great aunt.
Oh, yeah.
And she always said, I asked her the secret too as she was dying, and she said, happiness is a choice you make every single day. And it's very similar. They must have been kindred spirits for being from that generation and being finding that. And I do believe it is getting messy and like making a choice. I really want to be happy. That doesn't mean you always get to stay in just that emotion.
Yeah, and it isn't just a stagnant emotion.
And like not caring what the picture looks like.
Yes.
Right? And I think that for me was like the big one. Like, you know what? No one cares if it's not perfect and if you don't look perfect and if it doesn't seem like it's totally in order. The more you're able to just be like, this is real and this is messy and, you know, this is maybe falling apart.
Or just realizing the common humanity. I think growing up, at least for me, I really wanted to be the same as everybody because I thought I was weird. I thought our family was weird. And then now that I'm older, when I'm in those sad spaces and I isolate, something that really helps me get out is remembering that we all suffer, we all get happy, we all get sad, and reminding yourself that we are actually one versus alone is such a big key.
And notice assumptions. I call it my EPA instead of the Environmental Protection Agency. It's the emotional, just this having expectations and perceptions and assumptions. Just question those. Like the minute that I assume that someone did something for blah 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 blah, doesn't mean that was it. And just question it. When you're driving by, like it's that good old like everyone's house looks great, the yards are manicured, everything's fine, but what's really going on inside, we just don't know. So just owning what we know to be true for ourselves and then letting everyone just be who they are. I think that's a big aspect of how happiness shows up.
And be 100% yourself, which is easier said than done.
Totally.
I'm just now being like, oh, I didn't know I wasn't showing up all the way.
Yeah.
I was the masks, wearing a lot of masks.
Yeah.
Yeah, and sometimes you need to.
Yeah,
Sometimes it's safer.
Yeah, sometimes you need
to be
but, like,
protected.
but my best work is when
Yes.
I'm 100% myself.
Yep. Yep.
Well, I thought that was a really juicy conversation.
That
We'll
was
probably go
so
for another
good.
hour.
Yes.
So many
Thanks
different
for having
ways.
us.
Thank
But
you
why
so
don't we
much.
wrap up? Do you guys want to share like business social media handles or ways that people can contact you?
Go for it, girl.
We are at Maven SLC. You can find us several different ways, but we are down in Salt Lake, 155 East, 900 South.
And the paint mixer is in Park City on Main Street, and then also in Salt Lake and Sugar House. And then for art therapy and for working with trauma, that's at Hill Air Force Base and the Vet Center of Salt Lake, as well as Art Access.
Great. Well, thank you guys for joining us for another Ignite podcast where we were talking about happiness toolkit, but really like emotional awareness, I feel like,
Yes.
you know, and just not putting
Kind of
so
all
much
the same.
value
Yeah.
on that. You can join us again if you subscribe to our podcast on SoundCloud and on YouTube, and you can find Wild Women Tribe and meet up with other amazing women in person for adventures outdoors. You can find us at wildwomentribe.net and on Facebook and Instagram as well. Wanted to thank Park City TV again for being our media sponsor, and hope to see you next time.